Thank you. In addressing the question as to under what conditions, if any, is debarking morally justified, we find that it is only the most extreme conditions is morally justified. And what exactly that means, we'll get to in a minute. We think that, all things considered, a human is more important than a dog. We believe that if it's a matter of life and death, we choose the human life every time over the life of the dog.
Excuse me, let me understand. Did you get permission?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, sorry. So yeah, like I was saying, all things considered, we believe that the human life is more important than the life of a dog. However, in cases such as debarking, like the one provided in this case, all things are not equal. And it's the principle of utility and utilitarianism that we are relying upon here. In this case, we have a question of the rights of the people involved to peace and quiet, as it says in the case. Dr. White likes to read her newspaper at quiet in the morning, versus the rights of the dog to communicate. So it's human peace versus the dog's health, which is what we have here. So we have to determine, does the right of the human being to have a quiet breakfast outweigh the right of the dog to communicate, to not have to undergo this procedure and deal with any of the negative consequences that could potentially come from that. And we believe that in the principle of utility, that the greatest good is done by protecting the dog in this situation. We believe that though there are many more people in the apartment complex who would have their peace elevated, the detriment to the dog is greater. It outweighs that. So through the greatest good in the utility principle, we believe that debarking, for the most part, is morally unjustified. We, however, do believe that it is okay as a last resort in certain situations.
We believe that it's the last resort because let's look at the facts. The actual process means there's two ways that you can debark a dog. You can either go through the mouth or you can go through the throat within the decision. And though general anesthesia is used with both procedures, there's always the risks, the medical risks that are involved with such as surgery. There's of course pain and bleeding which can occur, and the tissue that they remove can grow back, or it can produce scar tissue which can suffocate the dog. And although it's not it doesn't happen as often. It's not a huge risk, but it still has occurred on multiple occasions, and we find that this is a needless mutilation, and that there's a difference between necessity and convenience. There's the convenience of debarking your dog simply because you believe it's too loud, if it's annoying, or if your neighbors complain, and we find that this goes along with things that surgeries such as ear cropping, declawing with cats. These are surgeries that are out of convenience, not purely necessity. Whereas spaying and neutering is a necessity because it has to do with a problem that society has faced, like stray dogs or dogs on the street that can hurt children or whatever. It was a problem. Whereas declawing of cats, hey, you're for ruining my furniture, or your barking is too loud. There's a difference between those two types of surgeries. The American Veterinary Medical Association takes our stands as well. They find that debarking should be used solely as a final alternative when behavioral training has failed. So if the barking of a dog is a problem, then other measures should be taken first. They should go through training. They should find peaceful means. They shouldn't physically remove the capability of the dog to communicate. And this is why we also say it's a convenience and not a necessity, because how does a dog communicate? A dog communicates through its bark. And I know many of us had pets when we were children, and I know one of the reasons why my parents chose a dog was for safety, for defense. If there was someone who came to the house, what's the dog going to do? Bark. Bark as loud as they can. And although debarking doesn't completely silence the dog, it does lower the volume of the dog so that the bark usually goes to about, I think it is 20 meters. So it's not silent, but it's definitely not as loud as it could be. And in instances where there's an intruder in the house, there's a threat of some sort, volume is a key vital, essential requirement. So we find there's a strict difference, or there's a plain difference between necessity and convenience.
I think it's important to note that we mentioned a couple times about the last resort option, and this is really the stance that defines our case, and the fact that where this is morally justifiable, and that is there's two conditions that we're allowing for. If the dog's owner is not able to care for their dog, and that the only last two choices that he has to control his dog is either A, abandonment at a pound, or B, putting the dog down. And he's not able to care for the dog in this capacity where he can use the collar, and he can use the electric collar, go to the training classes. Maybe he doesn't have the money for the training classes. Maybe the possibility of moving to a different location where the dog's bark won't affect other people, it's not an option for him. So his only two possibilities left and people are complaining, and he's given an ultimatum: either silence your dog or you're kicked out. Is that he has to abandon the dog at a pound or euthanize the dog. And so in these two situations, if it comes down to it, the life of that dog, or the life and well-being of that dog, because in a pound, obviously he's not going to get the same treatment as he does with a loving owner, someone who loves him unconditionally, that's where we value that dog's life. And we really should not be holding the dog accountable for its bark, for how it exists. It'd be like holding someone accountable for how they walk. You can't hold them accountable for that. That's part of who they are. That's part of who this dog is. The owner is the one who should be held responsible ultimately for how their dog's acting, and he's the one who should be getting the dog, going to the training classes to get the dog to stop barking. He should be the one who's looking into different ways aside from debarking that he can cause the dog to stop being so vocal. Like I mentioned earlier, there's several different types of collars. There's the training, there's the muzzle that could be used to stop the dog from barking. You could even move. Granted, not a lot of people have that opportunity available to them, that option available to them, but it is a possibility in some cases for some people to move to a different location where they don't have to worry about the dog's bark affecting their neighbors. The owner we should be looking out at the owner and saying, hey, this is your dog, this is your responsibility. Maybe the owner shouldn't have gotten a dog that was so vocal in the first place. Maybe he should have gotten a smaller dog that, its bark isn't as loud. One of those little lap dogs, for example. So we need to protect the dog in this situation specifically because of the inconvenience that is being had. The inconvenience to the neighbors is not as great as the risk to the dog itself. Selena pointed out that the AVMA has its own kind of ethic code, and it says in the case itself, veterinarians should consider the needs of the patient, relieve distress, minimize pain and suffering, and pain or fear. And there's nothing in there about how you're going to restrict the capabilities of an animal simply because it's an inconvenience. There's nothing in there that says anything about inconvenience. It purely is all about relieving disease, relieving suffering, minimizing the pain and fear that this dog is feeling.
Right. As an owner of a pet, we would want to provide for the best quality of life of our pet. And we believe that is the most ethical course of action in this situation, is to promote really the best quality of life for the pet. Now, if that is staying in the home and the owner is able to take care of the pet, then debarking is the only possible option if you'd be forced to give up the dog or euthanize it, as we said, because we believe that a surgery that would eliminate possibly the dog's means of communication is preferable to the dog either being put to death or being given up or abandoned on the street. So only in situations where the quality of life of the dog would be drastically lessened, should debarking not occur, do we believe that debarking is morally justified. Thank you.
We didn't get to one.